7:51. It is Tuesday, December 5th. And currently at the Noga Akihabara. This hotel is cramped, but every individual item in it is of good quality. This one I bought from 7-Eleven, 138 yen, 90 cents. This is like the original onigiri. And this one contains, I think, chicken, grilled chicken. All the flavors of Japan are markedly different from Korea. What I noticed is that I would say the rice quality is higher than the onigiri in Korea. The fillings could be good quality, maybe higher quality, but it's not as flavorful as the Korean ones. There's just something I've always known is that Japanese flavoring, Japanese foods tend to be more subtle. Koreans would even call it bland compared to Korean foods. That's the way Japanese like it. They like things more subtler. So there might be many sophisticates who would agree with that. Japanese foods are better because of that. In general, Japanese food and Korean foods are utterly different things, utterly different entities. So this egg bar contains carrots and almost like Japanese green bean, but again, much more subtler, just lightly sweetened compared to the Korean version. No, edamame, that's what it was. Edamame beans. A very Japanese egg bar. I don't know that I would say that I like it better than that Korean one I had from Korean 7-Eleven, but both Japan and Korea are hideously densely populated. I noticed this most at rush hour, which is around 7 to 9:30 in the morning and around 5 to 6:30 in the evening in both places. Though it's very true that many workers in offices work till late into the night, almost midnight every night. There are still enough middle-aged to early 30s aged workers that quit work at a reasonable hour that these rush hours do exist in both countries. During this time, the subways are unmanageably crowded sometimes. There's standing room only, of course, in the subway, but also the bodies are crushed tightly against one another. It reminds me of that scene from that Halloween night a couple of years ago in Itaewon, Seoul. People live like that here. That's something the Japanese and Koreans do share in common. Immensely crowded cities. It wasn't always this bad, but it was always very crowded. I remember when I was aged 4 to 5, roaming the streets of Seoul after school, and there were, to my toddler eyes, hordes of people standing tall all about me at all times. Sometimes I'd get caught up in a human wave and move along with the crowd and get lost. I learned at that young age to find my way home using visual cues that would be constants, like a very specific signage or a store at a corner, and I would index them in my mind to find my way home somehow. It was interesting to see occasionally here in Japan also little kids about age 6 or 7 walking around by themselves, just as I had 50 years ago. It does bespeak the safety of the people here generally. Even if there were a few rare sociopaths, there are enough there are enough citizen grannies and ajumas that look out for the stray little ones so that they won't get into trouble, such that parents, I guess, feel it's safe enough to allow it. Now, this would be unimaginable in the jungles of hell that are the U.S. cities. But to get back to the topic of severely crowded cities in Japan, I believe this is the heart of the fertility rates dropping to less than 1 in Seoul and Tokyo. Though some of it is not credible. John Calhoun's famous 1960s mouse utopia experiment suggested many overcrowding dangers which have become mimetic and common knowledge now. Though, of course, it wasn't exactly science what he did. Rats stopped reproducing after a certain amount of overcrowding was seen and developed highly pathological behavior such as homosexuality, narcissistic self-absorption, aggressive, warlike behaviors. all of which led to population extinctions. Though it wasn't scientific, and mouse and human populations are vastly different things, what the mice demonstrated and what we humans demonstrate nowadays are so concordant as to be hilarious almost. As I wandered about the top tourist sites throughout Japan, I was amazed at how Instagram thought phenomenon has so exploded among even the most unlikely populations of people like the Arab nation women wearing hijabs, Indian and Pakistani women, not just among Americans, Europeans, South Americans, Chinese, South Asians, but pretty much everybody in the world. Women from all these countries do this, and some boys as well. Everywhere you see these narcissistic she-devils primping and preening for their imagined fans. This is a self-esteem exercise that certain women cannot break their addiction from, apparently. So, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, it provides to them exactly what evolution developed them to need the most. Isn't it a phenomenon that perfectly delineates the cohort of mice that John Calhoun described as the beautiful ones? These mice never mated, nor reproduced, and I suspect the vast majority of these insta-thoughts will not reproduce either. Also, there was the rampant homosexuality of mice in Calhoun's mouse utopia. Doesn't it just perfectly reminds you of our insanely LGBTQP virtue signaling world today? What about the rampant violence in our cities, particularly in the African American ghettos of our cities? What this reminds me of is that section of Philip Gorovich's book about the Rwandan genocide of 1998. Years following the incident, he went back to interview many of those who participated in the violent killings and concluded that many of those who were killing were doing it with the foreknowledge that the population had to be reduced in order for them to get their basic living needs like eating and food and work secured. It was a perfectly valid excuse and reason and justification for the killings in their minds. And I wonder how much of the violent killing occurring in our cities today, in those ghettos, occur with such thinking deeply held in the back of their minds also. Killing others directly reduces competition for scarce goods. It is logical to do it when the competition becomes oppressive. All these ideas get at the important topic of the extremely low fertility rates in Seoul and Tokyo especially, and of Koreans and Japanese in general. It is not specifically a genetic issue, I don't think, but it does also get contributed to by environmental issues like the enormous problem of estrogens and progesterones in our water systems from oral birth control pills freely disseminated by a feminist ideology of certain physicians and educators since the 1950s. It's a complex issue, but there are these are the top reasons for the low fertility rates. Such low fertility rates are not seen in the matched cohort group in the study that is North Korea today. They have no problems with birth control pills in their water supplies. They don't have overpopulation problems either. They certainly do not have Jewish, Marxist, educational, and political propaganda going on that push their brand of feminism, though they do have their own brand of Juche Marxism, which does not push the same type of feminism that excludes reproduction. In the current severe overcrowding of the cities in Japan and Korea, reproduction does not make sense. The overcrowded competition and the low economic freedom that these young people live in despite the extremely long hours worked, the high intensity of work also, makes reproducing oneself pointless to them, just as it did to the mice in Calhoun's utopia. The solution is not to introduce more young people from other nations to the mix, which is what the Jewish NGOs and the business owners are pushing. The solution is to simply let these young people not reproduce. Let the fertility rate fall to 0.5. Let a generation or two or three wither on the vine mostly, and just allow a few chosen to reproduce, those who can provide. This actually will create a type of unintended eugenic effect. Those few kids who are born in the current environment in Korea and Japan are likely to be from the most wealthy and successful families. There is a linear correlation between wealth and success and high intelligence, as well as with other markers of evolutionary fitness like height, good looks, strength, physical supremacy. These kids born in a climate where the fertility rate is 0.5 is likely to be not from struggling families, but from these successful people. People with businesses who push for immigrants to be brought in so as their factories and their businesses won't go bankrupt are very short-sighted and very selfish. By creating another world of diversity in the claustrophobic world that is Korea and Japan today would be catastrophic, much worse than the catastrophe that has destroyed Europe, Canada, and the US within my lifetime. That's visible today just by traveling to those countries. Overpopulation is a very ugly thing that has only a single beautiful solution. Would you rather have wars with genocide, or would you rather allow generations to prune itself through the cessation of reproduction? Well, that is what's occurring in the rather intelligent populations that is Japan and Korea today.